Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I am excited as always to be here with you guys, and actually I'm really excited today because this is 10 of 10. I feel like I just started these interviews like yesterday, and here we are. We've now spoken to 10 amazing influential leaders moving and building boldly in their various industries. I am so happy to have my special guest with me today. But as you know the drill, I'll introduce myself. Bolanle Williams-Olley. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and co-owner of Mancini Duffy, which is an architecture and interior design firm based out in New York City. And we're having these conversations in celebration of my book, Build Boldly Turning One. Build Boldly, chart your unique career path, and lead with courage. We've been having the We Build Boldly conversations, like I'd mentioned. And today we will be talking Chapter 9, Your Legacy Starts Now, with Edmund Olotu. Yay! Hi, Edmund.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. I am excited and, amazed. I think want to just learn a bit more about your career journey and your story because you have had a very unique path. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to let you just tell us a little bit about how you started, what you're doing right now. You've gone from biotech to media to now fintech. Tell us about this unique career path and how you got here. Were you sitting in college like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to navigate.
The most interesting thing is that while I was even prior to getting into college, I think I was probably one of the few people who just knew that they didn't want to do a regular job, um, but I just didn't know what a non-regular job was supposed to look like, right? But I just knew I was going into school, or the career trajectory that had been plotted for me was that I was going to become a mechanical engineer. But I just knew I didn't want to work in mechanical engineering. Um, I kind of like thought that lawyers had a flexible, for whatever reason, I thought they had a flexible career path, that they only had to go to court and argue, and after that they go back home until someone else called them to come to court. I didn't know all about the contract writing and everything else that happens behind the scenes with lawyers. I was young, so I didn't know much. But yeah, I always felt like I'm doing what I wanted to do, which is not having a conventional 9 to 5 job. I've hardly ever had one, actually. So it's always been what I kind of like wanted to do. So immediately after my mechanical engineering degree, I found out that there was a degree course called Science and Technology Entrepreneurship at the University of Nottingham in England. And I immediately I sort of like, yeah, that looks like something that I need to do, right? So I applied, I got in, I went through that, and luckily for me, I graduated with a distinction. I say
Oh,
luckily, maybe I did work hard, but but I like to think that I was, more lucky than anything else. And I got offered a PhD to do a degree in entrepreneurship education. So I think
wow.
about um, probably about a year and a half into that, I really saw the distinction between academia and entrepreneurship, and um, and entrepreneurship in practice, right? And I realized I didn't want to do academia or entrepreneurship in academia. And at the same time, like I was becoming more and more aware of what was going on in the United States with entrepreneurship, dot-com boom, and the aftermath and everything else around that. And I was like, listen, that excitement looks like something that I want to be a part of, right? And um, that was what precipitated my moving over to the United States. And I was like, I need to go to the States. I need to figure out how I'm going to just get involved in entrepreneurship the way I kind of like or rather the way it had been glamorized, so to speak, right? So I applied to Harvard Extension School and I got in to do a master's in finance and control. And barely into my third month, of school, I was doing a coursework with a schoolmate of mine, and we came across a research paper that actually just been written like a week before. And in that research paper, the scientist, and I remember her name, Dr. Beat Sodiq in Germany, had discovered a novel pathway by which viruses infect the cell, right? And that was the premise of her paper. So I'm speaking to this, and we're actually doing a biotechnology assignment. So I'm speaking to my courseman. I'm like, wow, that just sounds interesting, right? Around that time, there's a lot of talk about HIV and AIDS in Africa. It was a recurring theme in journals, so it was something that was top of mind for me as well. So having read that, I was like, this sounds really interesting. Maybe it's something that ultimately could find its way back to Africa and help people on the continent. If a novel pathway means a better drug, a faster drug, or a cheaper drug, right? And he goes, yeah, that sounds like, okay. So why don't we build a drug out of this? And he was looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, I think we can. Let's try. And that's it. We literally just decided that it's something we could do and we could try. And maybe because both of us, he had a bit of a biotech background, he had worked in a biotech startup, and done some research, but I hadn't, right? And collectively we were both very, very naive. But that naivety is almost what got us through, because I'll tell you now, if I knew how big the journey was going to be or how hard it was going to be, I wouldn't have started at all, right? But I didn't know, he didn't know, we collectively didn't know, and we just started figuring stuff out, right? And ultimately, we wrote a paper about some of the early research we had done. We're working out of a lab at Harvard, Dr. Yarmish's lab. Was very, very gracious to us to kind of like get some of it, to allow us to use his lab to run some of these tests with some of his scientists. And um, ultimately, we had enough of a result that we could write a paper to um, to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Global Health, and we did, and we were one of 40 companies globally, out of 4,000 companies that had applied that year, and we won. So I think that was what really let us know that we're onto something. We could build something out of this, and we went on to raise venture money from venture capitalists, and ultimately sold that company in 2015 to Johnson and Johnson for $600 million. In between,
My mind
and
is blown because I just want to go back for wait. So just wait for a second. So you were in Harvard for a master's in finance, right? You just said.
finance. Yes,
And
yes,
then now you just linked up with this friend and then decided to start something in biotech. I mean, talk
pretty much.
about curiosity outside of the naivety, right? Like you were curious, looking to solve a problem, like the solution mindset. Again, you might not have intentionally known you were doing that then,
Yeah, yeah,
but that is what I'm hearing from this. And then this is now in you talked about your interest in the dot-com era and the excitement around that. That is just leader like qualities, right? So you're excited about entrepreneurship, and then here you are now, and you just said you sold your company to J&J for 600 milli
yeah,
dollars. $600 million, and you have not even started your career. Like, this is just you were in school, and then this is the first big thing that you did. Amazing.
yeah,
So I know there's still more to come, but I just wanted to pause there just so that we understand, like, of folks who are listening, just make sure that they grab what you're sharing, right? That curiosity is what led you down this path. And then, of course, taking it one step at a time, like you said, you didn't know what the journey was going to lead to, but you guys were willing to solve this problem. Are
Yeah.
you able to turn yourself? Because we can't see you. We can't
Oh,
see you. I can. We
let
can
me
just
let
hear
me
you.
see if. Oh, the
Oh,
light is
much
better here.
better, much better.
Sorry
Because the
about that.
impact of this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. So please continue. I am like invested.
Yeah. So in between that, when we raised the funding, we were able to get very experienced scientists to come on board the company. Guys who knew a lot more than me and my partner did. So I moved back to Nigeria at that point, and I thought, you know what, I want to solve another problem, right? I want to solve a bigger problem. I've been doing some research prior to moving back, and I realized that payments, there was a big disparity in how payments are made in the United States at that time and in Nigeria, right? And I saw that gap, and I thought that could be something I want to solve, right? So when I moved back to Nigeria, um, I started looking at how to solve that problem. What would be the best way to solve that problem? Um, and I figured, when at that time in Nigeria, people used to say, this is my ATM card, right? And it was a debit card, but it could only work on an ATM, right? So even till now, if you speak to some of the older generation, they refer to a debit card as an ATM card. And I thought, how can I take it from being an ATM card to being a card that could be used to pay online, pay on the POS, and everything else that I saw happening in the States and in the UK. So I had the technology. I tried to partner with the people who had issued this ATM card, and it was just an extremely difficult process. The world wasn't as collaborative as it is right now. In hindsight, I also realized that they probably were just trying to figure life out, themselves as well. But they were the biggest in technology company in the space, and they had the technology to at least create an ATM card that could allow you to withdraw cash from the ATM machine, but couldn't be used on a POS, couldn't be used on an online payment gateway, and I had technology for those things. Um, so I had taken some of the money I had made in the initial investment into my company. Then it hadn't been sold, and that's what I used to develop all that technology. So I came back and I was trying, and month after month, and nothing was happening. And I decided to also, take a job at a media company, right? So I could at least just use that as an opportunity to actually learn about Nigeria, because I hadn't been back in a very, very long time. I've been back maybe once during the holidays, but it was my first time since I left really spending an extended period of time, and I wanted to really learn Nigeria and how to do business in Nigeria. So I worked for a company called High TV. I was a GM for strategy and international business development. It was a great experience understanding business and partnerships and international partnerships on the African continent, beyond Nigeria. But at the same time, I was still tinkering away with figuring out how this was going to work. So at one point, I'd almost given up, and I went with a friend to go pay his electricity bills. Funny enough, I'd never had to pay electricity bills. I just never had to. So it was my first time actually experiencing it, because he had to go pay some bills, and I decided to go with him. And we spent 3 hours in a queue around the block trying to pay, right? And at that point, I thought to myself, this can't be it, right? If you had to take 3 hours out of your work day or your business day to pay a bill that was pretty much maybe $10,
Yeah.
um, the opportunity cost of that time is ridiculous compared to the amount of the bill you're paying. And so I started asking questions like, why is this not working? Why can't we just do this from our phone? Why can't we do this from anywhere? Like I should be able to go to a store and pay and everything else. But the technology didn't exist. So we approached the electricity company, who had signed a contract with a company to develop some technical systems for them. And we realized that the shortest way to get into this was for me to just figure out what was going on with that company. So I met up with the company. I go, "What are you doing here?" They're like, "Nothing much." I was like, "Okay, cool. Do you mind if we work together to do this? You're already in there. You have a contract that could be extended to do some of the things I'm thinking about. I have some technology that could be adapted to work in this manner. Why don't we form a company and just leverage your relationship and build this out for them?" So they agreed, and we formed the company, and I adapted my technology to work. They also brought in some technical resources. They were a tech company, so they had developers who then got absorbed into the company we're working on, and we, essentially designed and built some of the systems that the electricity companies use at a time to be able to do payments, right? So we built out systems that allowed mobile money operators like eTransact, Pocket Money to connect and do payments. We built scratch card systems, a whole bunch of stuff that allowed payments kind of like happen outside of those cash offices and reduce the time it took to make a utility bill. At some point, the electricity company went from being government owned to being privatized and broken down into bids. And at the same time, it was what we knew, it was what I knew. So I started working with other, when it was broken down, I started working with the private sector. But of course, it's no more government. When it was government, nobody wanted to work with them. Obviously,
Hmm.
the private sector company, you don't want to take the risk of government regulation or the risk of government not paying. I had no choice, right? I was just, it was either that or I keep doing my 9 to 5 job, right? And I didn't want to do that job. I mean, I love the job, don't get me wrong, but it's not what I wanted for myself in the long term. So immediately I had headway with the electricity company. I quit the job, as a means of kind of like pulling the rug from under my feet so I could make sure that
Hmm.
that worked and dedicate my time and resources to making it work. And ultimately it did. And even when it was privatized, we worked with a lot of the electricity companies. In fact, till date, we do in some capacity with at least six of them, 6 out of the 11. Um, and yeah, we built out systems that allowed them to accept payments easier, better, faster, made the system a lot more efficient, and we did a great job there as well. So I quite love that. But ultimately, I wanted to build a venture-backed company again, right? And I wanted to build a venture-backed company that essentially had my DNA, so to speak, because the first company I built, I was super young. I was inexperienced scientifically to take it beyond where we were just
Yep.
able to take it. So when the experienced scientists came and everything else, it was a company that, although I founded it or we founded it, me and my co-founder, we were both so young that it wasn't our DNA, it wasn't our culture. It was just a company we founded. But this time around, I had built a successful company in the electricity space, but it wasn't something I felt was scalable. It wasn't something I felt like I could take to other countries, and it wasn't something where I felt like um, could have the DNA of what I've been thinking about in Nigeria in that space. So I wanted to build like a venture-backed, scalable company, and I then decided to acquire a couple of licenses from the central bank. I'm a payment service license, and also acquired a small microfinance bank. And I merged those two licenses to form a company called Block. And Block
The
essentially
original
is
block.
the original Block,
The
not the one
original block.
yeah, not the one that the Twitter guys came after 3 months and changed their name to Block. This is the original Block before them, right? And so we formed Block, and Block essentially is back to my original thesis of being like a fintech or a payment infrastructure company, which is what I wanted to do back then, which I couldn't do. But now it's no more payments; it's fintech. So we're a core fintech infrastructure company doing both banking as a service and payment infrastructure in Nigeria.
Oh my goodness. All of this, like, can you give me the timeline? So is this like 20 years, 25 years? how long have you how long have you done like these three
Okay, so this
really,
journey
really
has been from Harvard Extension School all the way to now has been from 2006
so
till
it's
now,
even
right?
shorter.
So yeah, so
It's
it's yeah,
shorter.
it's
You have
not quite.
accomplished some major audacious out there goals in we're in 22, right? 16
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
So I just want to take a moment just to appreciate you, appreciate the thinking, right? The building, the collaborative, your aptitude for collaboration, right? I'm like those were the words that were just coming to my head as you were sharing. You're not afraid to partner with people. You're not afraid to like if everyone is working together towards this common goal of solving this problem, you have no issues whatsoever in partnerships. I love it.
definitely.
It is complete legacy building, even if you might not have labeled it that way, right? So even
Yeah,
for me in my business, I say me and my partners, right, we're in our legacy building years, and that goes to something that you shared around wanting something that had your DNA, right?
yeah,
So you've helped others in building their legacy, right? You've helped
yeah,
country, not just
yeah,
states, but country. But now you're actually in this next level, next stage. And I have to say, I don't even think this is the last thing that you're going to solve. There are other
yeah,
things, there are other offshoots. I love your journey because Edmund hasn't said this though, right? He's given us almost the nine, not 9 to 5 ish, but the professional one. But you've also started businesses, right? You're also exploring your other passions while you're
yeah,
building Block, right?
yeah.
So folks like you, like I just love it. I love to see it happening. Edmund is very, very passionate about cars, restoring old cars, right?
Yeah, I restore vintage cars. That's my hobby.
Yes, that is his hobby, and so I love it. I don't even, yeah. So I'm like trying to gather my thoughts to go back to the book also, right? And in the book I talk about legacy as something that is happening like right
Yeah,
now. It is not
yeah.
something that you're doing in the future, or like you're like, oh, I'm not going to worry about it till later. But every single day is an opportunity for us to build towards our legacy, and everything that you shared um, that's what you're doing. We're all looking back now and hearing you share this story, and everything that you've done has contributed towards this amazing legacy that you're leaving behind, right? And so for me, as a leader in this current season that you're in, what legacy would you love Block, your company, right? You've said what you want, right? You wanted something with your DNA, but what would you like to see Block do, either for Africa, for Nigeria, or globally, as you're now figuring things out and solving the problem?
Um, I'm glad you asked that question because that is something that earlier this year I was forced to quantify, right?
Mm,
Or perhaps qualify to my colleague because we were still trying to figure out what I was trying to download essentially what I felt the business wanted to do, right? What I felt we should stand for. Um, and I wanted it to be what would guide how we interact with other people in our space or other people who come in contact with us, right? And I told them, and I said, there are two ways, back to legacy. There are two ways to have a legacy, right? And one is by blazing a trail, and the other is by shining a light on a path for other people to blaze a trail. And personally, I just felt like, listen, in this game of entrepreneurship and tech entrepreneurship, I'm a little old, I'm a little slow, you know. Everyone's super smart, super young. I'm probably not blazing any trail right now, but I would love to um, shine a light on a path for other people to follow, for other people to blaze their own trail because they can see the way ahead. And I think that represents what Block is doing as a fintech infrastructure company, right? We see that if you have an idea, we want it to be as easy as possible for anybody, a recent graduate, anybody at all, to say, hey, listen, I can leverage Block, right, to bring my idea to life, right? And hopefully, beyond bringing it to life, it becomes a significant innovation that helps the lives of people in Nigeria, hopefully across Africa when we expand across Africa and globally as well. And I want that story to be told that at one point, Block, Block gave us a leg up, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily Edmund, because I'm also trying to de-emphasize myself in the story, but rather Block. Block because everybody that has staked their career by working at Block understands that they are building what they're building within the context of their job function at Block to make sure that other people find it easier to be innovative, right? Um, when I started out, I didn't know I was innovative. I just wanted to solve problems, but I met all the roadblocks anybody could ever meet,
Hmm.
right? And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this again, then the first step is eliminating as many roadblocks as
Yes.
possible for other people to leverage what we're building to go to the market as quickly as possible to express their own innovativeness as easily as possible. And that is what we do. So it trickled down to how we interact with people, right? So we can have all the amazing technology out there, but if somebody comes and wants to use it and they have to jump through hoops to use it, then it's a waste of time. There are companies that are bigger than us who are building things that are like similar to what we're building, but I know there's a difference when they interact with us versus how they interact when they interact with them, right? You're interacting with us, and we want you to genuinely feel that we're giving you a leg up to go out there and be innovative. We don't want you to feel like we're here to just complicate your life because you're about to set up a business or
Yeah.
you're about to build a product, right? So ultimately, back to the original question, legacy for me and legacy for us is shining that path on shining that light on the path so other people could either follow or other people could could blaze could blaze the path.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I think again as leaders, like that is our sole role is or one of the most important roles outside of running your company. But what are you really doing either to help either is maybe the folks you're servicing, your clients, your people, right? How are you lifting your people and making the path easier, their pathway easier for them? And I want to now like just turn the conversation now to people, right? So
Yeah,
again, we're building these bold companies, we're doing these great things, but then there are folks that we're nurturing, like I said.
yeah.
How do you want, or if we're to advise folks who are coming up within their careers, right? Keeping this mindset of legacy building or thinking about what they want to accomplish in their careers, what would you advise them when it comes to intentional decision making that can cause alignments with the
Mm,
legacies they want to build, right? um like I'm just thinking of somebody who is
yeah.
fresh out of school and is like, wow, these people are doing great things, but how do I align myself with this path? How does it affect me career wise? What intentional decisions do they need to make sure that they feel like they're on the right path?
And I think and this question is pretty it's a pretty important question right now because all over social media you hear people talk about the classifications Gen Z versus this and everything, and I often tell people everybody was young one day, right?
Yep.
The same way the people older than us were probably looking at us thinking, what the hell are these guys doing? Is the same way we're looking at people coming up thinking, what are these guys doing? But fundamentally, I think um, I don't know if I've always been intentional about it, um, but one thing I try to pass on to people is in everything you're doing, in every interaction, is there a way for you to make sure that it's a win-win interaction, right? Um, Even when I do business with people outside of block or something, or just when I'm in business, like I could be buying something from someone, right? I mean, we all grew up in Nigeria. I remember when I'd follow my mom to the market or something, and then there'll be pricing. You want to buy some plantains or tomatoes, and my mom would try to the bare minimum, get the best deal because that's what they knew, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
they grew up and that's what they knew. But what I try to do when I do stuff with people is if I'm the only one that feels like I got a deal, then it wasn't a deal,
That's right.
right? At that point, it's a steal. I stole it, and I don't want to be a thief. You understand what I mean?
Hmm.
So it mirrors in everything, right? If you're going to work every day and you're thinking to yourself, at the end of the month, I'm going to get my salary. So I'm going to, as much as possible, do the bare minimum
Hmm.
just so that I do that. Not only are you stealing from your employer, you're stealing from your colleagues because you have your other colleagues who are working hard so that the company can make revenues and do everything and then have the money to pay you. So if you're not contributing your quota, then you're stealing from them as well, right? But the worst part of it is that you're stealing from yourself because you're not learning, you're not developing any skills, you're not developing any social interaction because you're avoiding people as much as possible to do the least work. So what you think you're winning, you're not winning, you're stealing, right? And you're stealing from everybody, including yourself, right? Because your colleague who decides to go in there and do maybe a little bit beyond what he's meant to do, right? And maybe other people look at him and go, "Oh, this guy's an idiot. It's a 9 to 5 job. Why are you there till 7 or whatever?"
Hmm.
Right? Ultimately, he learns more. He interacts more with people. He networks more. Right? If you want to do anything well, you have to put in the time. It's like an athlete, right? If
Yep.
an athlete who runs track every single day, trains hard and everything, is always going to be better than the athlete who decides he can do the bare minimum, right? It's the same thing in your career. If you decide to do the bare minimum, your career will reward you with the bare minimum, right? And ultimately, you would have stolen from yourself. So I I think what I try to tell people is in every interaction with people, are both of you winning, right? If both of you are not winning and you're the only one winning, then you're you might think, oh, so I have a one up on someone or something, but ultimately you'll figure out much later on that you're the one you're just you know you're doing yourself the ultimate disservice, right? So yeah, that's
I don't think I've heard it put the way you just put it now, right? You're not only stealing from the company, you're stealing from your colleagues because some people might say whatever about the company, but when you think
yeah,
about relationally, right, the folks you're interacting with, people you like, don't like, whatever, respect, that framework makes you think about it differently. And lastly, as you said, stealing from yourself, stealing from your growth. If you put in bare minimum, your career is going to give you bare minimum. I said it is what separates or differentiates the folks who have fulfilled, rich, fulfilling
yeah,
careers than those who don't, whether or not you are even interested in going to leadership. I don't even think this what you're sharing is just about, oh, path to leadership or path to becoming an entrepreneur, but like just your career as a whole.
yeah.
You're not going to have a fulfilled career if you just put in the bare minimum. So I love that.
That's yeah.
I absolutely love that. and I mean, I could keep talking to you forever because this is really good. I think the last question I want to ask you, and then we'll wrap up, is, what is your own challenge to other leaders who are, building bold, audacious firms or companies? What would be your challenge to them when it comes to thinking about their legacy and also their interactions with their people?
Oof, that's a tough one, right?
Especially, again, in your space, we've been seeing a lot of the things that have been happening, with the layoffs, with company culture, with just lack of empathy. um, However, day-to-day company running is still happening. So I asked this because I wrote this book not just for folks who are navigating their careers, but for it to be a challenge to leaders when it comes to thinking about, what kind of organizations are they running and building. So yeah, tell me, what would be your challenge?
Oof, that's a tough one, right? Because we're all in the trenches. Like I was speaking to someone the other day, and I said, you know what, you would hardly find me criticizing any company, right? I leave
That's right.
that for everybody else. Um, and um, even if I might have some reservations about leaders, especially the ones who do outright catastrophic things that ultimately are borderline criminal and fraudulent and everything, right? Um, I keep those criticisms, within very very close circles and everything, right? And that's because I know for a fact that sometimes when, as a leader, you're juggling multiple crosswinds, right?
Mhm.
You're, you know, you're you have human capacity issues, you have resource issues, you have your own personal family issues that tend to interfere with what you're doing. And ultimately, you never have enough time and you never have enough resources for every single touch point within your life, right? And within your organization ultimately. So, how people make those decisions under those kind of like strenuous circumstances, and how sometimes the outcome of those decisions affect other people is a very very sensitive topic, right? So it's never really my style to see someone who maybe didn't make the decision I'd make and ultimately have a reason to speak on it, right? But what I try to tell as many people as I speak to who are in this space is, when you ultimately get to the point where um, you you've overcome certain steps, right? You've achieved a certain pinnacle in your career. Just don't be a coward, right? Just don't be a coward leader, right? Because no matter what, you have to be an example to somebody else coming afterwards, right? People have to see you and say, at least I like one thing they did extremely well, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that is what inspires people to do more. That's what inspires somebody coming up behind us, especially within our context, building in Nigeria, Africa, where there's limited resources. Um, um, there are not that many examples of leaders. So the few that exist have to really be, you have to kind of like be strong enough to make bold decisions, right? And just act in the capacity to be bold, right? So sometimes when people are like, "Oh, you're speaking about politics, you're doing, but what don't you think about your business? Don't you think about this?" You know, um, you know, and I'm like, I'm speaking because I'm Edmund. I'm not speaking because
Yeah.
of my company,
Yeah.
right? And if I don't speak about the wrongs that affect ultimately the people in my company, right? If I don't have a stance, if I don't have a say, if I'm too cowardly to express myself, um, then what I fear ultimately will still arrive at my doorstep,
Mhm.
right? The economy will become so bad, the climate will become so bad, right? That even no matter what I do, no matter what revenues we generate, it will never be enough to satisfy my people or satisfy the market we're in or whatever it is, or my investors or shareholders. So ultimately, what I'm afraid of by not speaking up, is there, right? And if I don't speak up after the little I've accomplished, so to speak, right? Um, what about the guy that's coming behind me? He stands absolutely no chance, right? So I think ultimately, when you build your career, um, I think it's important that as leaders, as emerging leaders, we should be able to take a stand. We should be able to be outspoken in certain things. We should be able to be like fearless about certain things, right? I know a lot of people who are in leadership positions who wouldn't talk about anything feminism. They wouldn't talk about gay rights. They wouldn't talk about politics because they're like, listen, I need to be neutral. My business is my business. I'm like, well, if you've been able to build a business, right? And you've been able to be successful to this point, and you cannot advocate for other people who have less than you or ultimately are marginalized within your society, then it's a waste of time because you ended up you got everything that God could possibly put in your path, only to end up a coward.
Yeah,
So, like in building a legacy, you must go beyond the work that you do to what you do for society, so to speak, right? And contributing to society, whether it's tangibly or intangibly by speaking up for other people who might not have a voice for themselves.
perfect. Blown. I can't wait to listen to this again. Oh my God. Thank you, thank you, thank you for spending this time with me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I usually love to end these with fill in the blanks. I'm going to ask you two. I'm going to ask you two questions. Don't worry, it's all good. I'm going to ask you two questions, and then afterwards, you just let us know how we can connect with you, learn more about the work you're doing at Block, and how folks can stay in touch. Okay, so Edmund is building his legacy when?
Ooh. Edmund is building his legacy when, or do I complete it after
Ye-
Edmund is building his legacy?
Edmund is building his legacy. You can finish, then you can add your own.
Edmund is building his legacy every time, every minute. I don't think there's a minute off or a day off, right?
Yep.
So Edmund is on this. It's
Yes.
his lifestyle. His
Yes.
legacy is his lifestyle. So
Done. And the last one, Edmund is building boldly when?
ooh, Edmund is building boldly when he makes the best decisions for everyone involved.
Done. Done. Perfect. Tell us
Thank
where we
you.
can connect with you
So
and
I'm on
Block.
social media, Instagram, Pajama CEO, Pajama underscore CEO. Um, you can email me, Edmund at blockhq.io.
So that's
Um,
BLOC dot.
BLOC, no K,
Yes.
BLOCHQ.io. Um, and if you see me somewhere, buy me a drink.
Done. Done deal. Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed these conversations. Again, we were discussing Chapter 9, Your Legacy Starts Now, of Build Boldly. Buy a copy, buy 10, buy for your organizations, buy for your
And that was
leaders,
you,
your
actually.
people. Please do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, all the replays for these conversations I've been having are going to be available. I'm going to share the link so that you can catch up if you're watching this on a replay. Edmund, thank you so much for spending time again. I appreciate you. Until, I don't know, the next live, maybe, maybe not.
Until I'm in New York again, maybe.
Until you're in New York. Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much, Bolanle. Thank you.
All
I
right.
appreciate you making time out for this. It's great. It's a great
Of
job you're
course.
doing. So
Thank you.
it's good. It's good.
All right, guys. Bye, everyone.
Nice. Thank you.